Ben Shapiro wrote a somewhat lengthy thread. I'm sure you guys probably heard, I'm not sure, I didn't talk about it. This guy named Kevin Williamson, he was a writer at The Atlantic, and he was fired after he said that he thinks that women who have abortions should be hanged. So, naturally, conservatives are going to come out and cry wolf and victim complex it up. So, here's what he said in this thread. He says, Kevin Williamson's firing is how you got Trump, as well as the alt-right's near mainstreaming. Here's why. The left continues to radically narrow the Overton window, the spectrum of acceptable discourse. They separate discourse into two categories, the acceptable and the unacceptable. Then they shrink the acceptable down to the opinions located between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders. This necessarily places Kevin Williamson and Barry Weiss and Sam Harris and me and everyone else the left finds unpalatable into the, quote, excluded category. But the unacceptable category is already populated by those who are actually unacceptable, alt-right trolls, for example. This means that the population of opinion in the unacceptable category, let's call them deplorables since the left does, come to be a majority by way of exclusion. Unless that is virtuous people who have been excluded by the left draw at distinctions among themselves, which they should, of course. Kevin and Barry Weiss and I and Sam Harris all get lumped in as Nazis by the far left, but we all fight the actual alt-right Nazis. But counting on the virtue of people you've just deemed unacceptable not to band together against you is both stupid and unrealistic over time, which means the left is doing something unethical here and deeply dishonest, and something that is likely to foster polarization that results in the mainstreaming of truly gross opinions. This is how you get a reactionary movement willing to countenance alt-right evil. You tell people they're a part of the alt-right when they're not, and treat them as such no matter how much of a lie that is. What just happened to Kevin Williamson leads conservatives to side with anyone the left casts out, good or bad, merely as a form of protection. That shouldn't happen, but it does, and the left caused it with his bullshit. So he goes on this lengthy thread of essentially just spewing a bunch of garbage, right? The idea that the Overton window has been placed into between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders is almost laughable, when legitimately the government is controlled by Republicans. Every single fucking branch of government is controlled by conservatives, but somehow you're telling me that the Overton window is between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders when the tax cuts that is massively conservative just got passed. A repeal of Obamacare almost just got passed. There are things like that happening on a daily basis. The president is Republican. The Senate has a Republican majority. The House has a Republican majority. It's like, what are you talking about? The Supreme fucking Court has a conservative majority. How can the Overton window possibly be between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders when the government is controlled by Republicans and conservatives? By the way, he never mentions once in this entire thread that Kevin Williamson advocated for the hanging of women who get abortions. So it's such bullshit. I mean, if you are a news outlet and you have somebody who advocates for hanging of abortions, wouldn't you fire them? That's almost like common sense. Really, it is. And now he just goes on to say a bunch of shit. Now, first of all, this is the main thing that I want to touch on, because I'll look at Ben Shapiro's tweets every once in a while to see, what kind of dumb shit he's saying. Now, every time something happens, essentially, he'll say, his main quote is, "This is how you got Trump." Okay, he'll say, "This is how you got Trump." I remember specifically there was some CNN thing that happened. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was something CNN did. They did some kind of dumb story, as they always do. And he goes, "This is how you got Trump." He says that for everything that happens. That's all he says is, "This is how you got Trump." This is for anything whatsoever. So he's just making shit up now. And by the way, where he says that, somehow that we call Ben Shapiro, Kevin, Barry Weiss, and Sam Harris all Nazis is absolutely stupid, of course. Now, I've always been fair to Ben Shapiro, and many people have. He's not alt-right. He was anti-Trump, and most of us know that, right? He's not alt-right. And then Sam Harris, I mean, he's a liberal. He's anti-Trump. Why would we call him a Nazi? Nobody's calling him a Nazi at all. Barry Weiss, I don't really know about Barry Weiss. I don't know who the fuck that is. And then Kevin Williamson, nobody's calling him a Nazi either, but he literally advocating for the hanging of women who get abortions. So the idea that we lump in, well, first of all, here's something else that I want to say. Lumping in the left as one big ass lump is very stupid too. Because the problem with these movements is that, like Joe Rogan said, anybody can be a part of them. So you're going to have idiots on the left who do call, Ben Shapiro an alt-right or whatever. But that's not the majority of the left. And that's not the, rational part of the left, very obviously. But the idea that anybody calls Ben Shapiro and Sam Harris Nazis is beyond belief. It's absolutely beyond belief. And he also goes on to say that, he said, "This is how you get a reactionary movement willing to countenance alt-right evil. You tell people they're part of the alt-right when they're not, and treat them as such no matter how much of a lie that is." So, essentially what he's saying is the reason that we got to a near mainstreaming of the alt-right and a big alt-right is because people casting out. But he has previously stated that he thinks that the alt-right is a kind of reactionist movement to people saying we want we want a gay representative, we want a lesbian representative and transgender representative, and he stated that I'm essentially quoting him almost verbatim. So what he does is he takes every opportunity he can to make this victim complex. He creates and constructs his own victim complex, and he fills it in every step of the way with, this is how you got Trump. This is the alt-right, this is why the alt-right's risen. He's never, really ever telling the truth. He's just lying here to get himself points. And creating a victim complex while, painting the left as the ones creating a victim complex has been something that the Republicans have been doing for decades.